I'm going to call this to order. We are here tonight to interview Mickey Hall. We welcome you to the interview session. He's had a busy day today, meeting at central office and then meeting Murray Alliance, had business leaders and was able to meet with them, and a webinar was with that, and we met with quite a few teachers and other visitors this afternoon at Central High School. So I said he has talked his way to this point. So knowing that we've all read your resume, and as you've told the teachers, you've probably looked into me as well, tell us something that we don't know from your resume.
The recent tornado events that happened in Wilson County, you don't really disclose this in a resume, I don't guess, but I was part of that personally. My home was hit, and we actually started getting calls about 12:45 to 1 a.m. about the schools in the Mount Juliet area that got hit. So I'm on the phone trying to assess my personal stuff, but we're also getting calls to try to handle the schools and get people headed that way to determine the extent of the damage that we had. And when we first got the call, we didn't think it was that bad, but we ended up losing 2 schools, and we had damage to 45 school buses, our bus depot, our fuel island, and our athletic complex for West Wilson Middle School.
Challenging, to say the least.
It is.
Right. I don't know, did you get to Natasha? You haven't met Natasha Hopkins, board member, and this is Kristen Parker.
Hi.
And I think these guys took you on a wild ride. And
they did.
And so the others of you met. So I'm going to let Kristen start with the first question.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Hall.
Thank you.
Can you describe your process for developing a successful team at the district and school levels that is student-centered? And as a part of that, can you also kind of include what your plans are for recruiting and promoting employees to fit that goal?
I have a really strong philosophy in making sure the right people are in the right places to do the job and for students to be successful. That's what drives me every day in any decisions that I make in my current position, because that's the success. We have to be in this for kids. If you're not in it for kids, then you are not in the right profession. That's Mickey's opinion. But what I would do is I would assess the whole district and try to learn every program that you've got, where those programs are, do they need to be moved, or are people in the right places to make those programs successful. And then if we need to advertise for positions or anything, then open up the applicant pool and make sure we're making good selections that first meet the needs of kids, but also good teachers and for those kids. I always had the philosophy there's a lot of good people in the world, but sometimes good people don't make good teachers. And the same thing applies for administrators at the school level or the district level. And those are things that you have to make a decision, and sometimes you have to have some hard discussions to make sure you're meeting the needs of those kids.
Kind of to follow up on that, can you kind of go through like what one of those conversations might look like? How do you have that hard conversation?
The first thing you have to do is you have to make sure that there's documentation in place, that you've talked to them and disclosed some concerns or some things that needed to be improved. And then sometimes they may be serious enough for that not to occur, but you just have to bring those individuals in and talk to them and just say, you know, sometimes they may be in the wrong profession. And so we always look at it from the standpoint, sometimes you may just have to tell somebody, you need to look for another career. This is not going to work out for you. And those are hard. They're emotional. But as long as you keep the kids in your mind on why you're making a decision, it will work itself out.
Okay. Another question. How have you used planning and goal setting to improve your schools or the systems that you work in?
I guess I'll answer that on 2 fronts. First, from a staffing standpoint, and second, from a capital standpoint. In 2014, we wrote out new pay plans for our teachers, and then we wrote out a new pay plan for our administrators, and then we wrote out a new pay plan for our support staff. Our teacher plan was a 3-year implementation. The administrators was a 1-year implementation, and then our support staff was a 4-year implementation. From a planning standpoint, we had to go through different models, because one of the things you have to do in a budget process is you have to make sure something's predictable, but more importantly for us, it's sustainable. You don't want to throw something out there and then have to back up on it. So we went through 26 different models before we came up with how we wanted to pay our teachers. And then the administrators were pretty straightforward, but we looked at comparable districts and looked at pay. We took our beginning pay for teachers from $34,605 to $41,000 in a 3-year period, and so we felt like that was very aggressive. And then the administrators, we moved to 12 months, but we also adjusted their salaries to meet that 12-month guideline. And then for support staff, it was a 4-year implementation, and matter of fact, we're just rolling into the first year that we're not in an implementation plan for our support staff. But we did the same thing, planning, looking at other school districts before we rolled something out. From a capital project standpoint, we have a 5-year plan. Some people call it a 10-year plan, but Wilson County is growing so quickly that it's a 5-year plan. It would be a 2- or 3-year plan if we had the money from our county commission, and our county commission in Wilson County has been really good to us. We do not have any portables in our school district, which we're very proud of. But it's a living, breathing document, the way we built it, and it has to be that way because growth can always occur in the future somewhere you didn't see it happening. And so that plan has to be able to be modified by the board from the standpoint, do you need to pull a school up quicker, or do you need to pull a renovation up quicker? But you also have to be willing to go back and adjust your numbers because construction costs are going up so much. And we've been doing that. This is my either 4th or 5th rendition of a 5 to 10 year plan in capital projects.
Hi, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
In your administration, what avenues are open for you to listen to the concerns of employees, students, parents, and the community?
I think phone calls, community meetings, faculty meetings, district level meetings, chamber meetings, Rotary meetings, different ways like that to meet the community and parents or business leaders. But from the staffing standpoint, anyone within this district, I have an open door policy. If you call me and want to meet within an hour, that may not occur, but I will meet with you. So as long as everybody understands, I'm going to return all my calls. I'm going to return all my emails. But I try to have a philosophy to try to do that within 24 hours. Depending on the volume or what's in front of the board, that might occur, and it might be 48 hours or 72 hours, depending on how the topic's going community-wise. So, but I never refuse to meet with anybody at all. Sometimes they're going to be okay with my answer, and sometimes they won't like that answer, but I will attempt to give them my version of how I feel about it or any recommendations I would make to this board.
And planning, your planning, because I know you have lots and lots of time. How would you plan to have the time available for all of those involved? How do you manage that? How would you plan that?
A lot of it's priority-wise, but if there's a hot topic that's coming in front of the board or in front of the district, I think community meetings, you can tell people, I'll be at this meeting to come and answer your questions there instead of them sending a lot of phone calls or requests in for an appointment. Some people don't like that, so if they want to meet individually, I'm still going to do that. You just have to prioritize your time. The big difference between an administrator, if somebody moves from the classroom to the administrator, if you ask an administrator, you have in your classroom, you sort of plan out what you're going to do, how you're going to take those standards, and how you're going to progress throughout the year. From an administrator standpoint, you're waiting on the next phone call, the next email, the next something. So you don't have a plan from that standpoint. But again, my priority is to always answer something within 24 to 48 hours.
Hi, Mr. Hall. With Maury County Schools having such a diverse population, as we drove around, you saw city schools, rural communities, high growth areas. What would you implement or to make sure that all of those populations are the student needs are met?
My whole philosophy has always been if we're taking care of kids and we know what their needs are, it doesn't matter what part of the county they live in or what zip code they live in or what the color of their skin is. I always would hope our staff would have the kids centered first and know the kids, because there's things that happen within a kid's life that we won't know about, but teachers will, whether a child's homeless or they're in a domestic situation or family situation. That's going to cause that kid to react a certain way. So every discipline doesn't fit that situation. So the emphasis is, I've always tell everybody, I want the teachers to take care of the kids, and then we're going to take care of everything else. I don't need teachers worrying about what comes out of the state legislature. I don't need them to worry about what comes out of the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. That's district level things we have to decipher, but work it into a common method that can apply to a classroom in this school district, so they don't have to worry about that because they have enough on them.
Good evening, Mr. Hall. So what I've got here, it's kind of blunt here. What are the reasons that you want to leave your current position to come here to Murray County Public Schools?
The opportunity. I think there's a lot of opportunity for improvement within the district. I know there's a lot of opportunity to show your teachers how to be supported, respected. I think your teachers need that. When I was asked to apply or look at it, I think I have a lot of qualities that can meet that. But teachers have to be supported. You cannot throw things at a teacher or put things in front of them that's not supported, vetted, or done without professional development. They have to understand all those components to make it successful. Otherwise, they're just going to reject it.
Well, my question is, describe a significant change that you initiated in your current role, and tell us what evidence you have to show it was a positive change, and how did you build support for that change?
Probably on two fronts with our teachers. The first one was about our health insurance program. We're self-insured. When you're self-insured, the board is the trustees of the insurance plan, and it's not an insurance company policy, so we have to make sure it's sustainable and it's financially stable. We came out with what was called a preferred and standard plan, but we did that with the teachers sitting around the table, and they understood the importance that if you took care of yourself, you stayed in the preferred plan, which the benefits have not changed for teachers since 1985 in Wilson County. They've gotten better. But if you're not going to take care of yourself, then you would go into the standard plan, which is a higher deductible, higher co-pays. We did that with the teachers. That was before they did away with the negotiations law. And I felt very proud of that because we did it with teachers sitting around the table, and we all agreed to implement that. The second one was salary schedules that we did for teachers. We have a performance pay plan in our district, which, again, we work with teachers, and we did a lot of putting the show on the road, so to speak, where we went around to the different schools and we had teachers come in and let us do a PowerPoint presentation to them and explain it to them. But the main point of that whole salary schedule is we told our teachers, we will never do anything to hurt you. It will always be in your favor. And we've had to modify that plan each year because of what's happened at the state level because of testing or evaluations. And so we're always going to do what's in the best interest of teachers. So we've done as high as the best of 3 years to be able to move up on our performance pay plan. So you may have had a rough year the first year, but the last 2 years you've really improved. So once they get money, it's not taken away, but we got teachers to understand that, and we think that's been beneficial. We have a high number of teachers that are level 3, 4s, and 5s in our district, and we're very proud of that.
All right, Mr. Hall. What steps would you take to ensure school funds are spent wisely and accounted for properly?
That's sort of been the core of my job currently. I told the teachers earlier, for 28 years, I've had to learn the academic side. I had the business side down fairly well before I came to Wilson County Schools. So I've had a lot of good instructors in these 28 years. I'm a very quick study and I listen a lot. If you listen and you got your good teachers and good principals and things, they will brainstorm and you can pick out the right ideas. It has to be a team effort. So that's where I think my strength is. But from a standpoint, we've been 15 plus years without an audit finding in our district, and I'm very proud of that and proud of my staff. That takes a lot of work to do that. We don't miss payrolls, we don't miss benefits, we take care of our staff. Unless the staff gave me the wrong form or something like that, their checks are going to be in the mail. We've gone from printed checks to automatic deposits. They'll get their notice that their check's going to be in on the 30th of May. They've already got their notice that it goes in there. And so those are things that I'm very comfortable with. That's my job on a daily basis, to make sure everything's in balance in schools. Things are spent at the schools in an equitable fashion from the district level, but also that fundraisers are approved at the district level in an equitable fashion as well.
All right. Our board is dependent upon the county commission to fund the budget. How would you propose to gain their support of the budget?
I work hard at that all the time too with our county commission. As I mentioned earlier, since I've been with our board, we've done about $700 million worth of building programs, and they've done a great job on the capital side. They get a little irritated sometimes because they think we tell them they're not doing a good job on the local side for operational purposes, and that's not what we're telling them. What we're trying to do is explain BEP, and if you know anything about BEP, it's based on your ability to pay. So you have to do an educational piece that as your ability to pay goes up, which that's happening in our current district, the local effort has to start coming up somewhere. And so we've never slammed our county commission, even though some of them take it that way. Our job is to advocate for kids. The director's job is to take whatever is approved by this board and make sure it gets transmitted correctly to the county commission. But you also have to let them know, call me anytime. You know, the worst thing anybody can do in this business, from a board member standpoint or a director of schools or a county commissioner, don't blindside anybody. A simple phone call could have corrected something that got blown way out of proportion. Work with them, tell them what's coming, and I think that support will be there. But as long as you tell them the truth and you're consistent in what you're telling them, then the respect will come along. At least it's been my practice in 28 years to find that out for our county commission.
Thank you.
Hey.
Hi again. Have you been successful in getting strong parental and community support for a school, program, or district? And tell us about one such success.
Well, one of them is our most recent high school, and we will open Green Hill High School in August. It's our newest structure, campus, 9 through 12 comprehensive high school. It's the largest investment Wilson County has ever made in a public project. It's about $107 million, and that's turnkey. That's everything included. We had some folks in the community did not want one high school sort of separated, and so we started going out and talking to the communities. We showed them zoning maps. We showed them pieces of property we were looking at and why certain pieces of property were better situated or located. And once they understood that and they get over the shock, you know, my family has always gone to this school for 100 years. When we're growing at 500 to 600 kids, they have to get over that a little bit. But if you present the data in the right way, then we took that group of parents and they started, every time something negative would come out, they would start counteracting that for us. The business people did the same thing. The chamber people did that. We lost 2 schools to the tornado. It still came up from a segment of our community. Don't open that high school up. Just use it for the 2 schools that got blown away. And you can't invest $107 million in a high school and not open it up. So we've done that, and we're actually using the 2 high schools. We're moving the 7th and 8th grade out of 2 middle schools into 2 high schools in Mount Juliet area. So instead of getting relief at the 2 high schools, they're going to open up above capacity because we lost 2 schools. If we didn't have this new school, we would be in the world of hurt right now trying to place 1,700 kids.
What do you consider to be your major strengths that you would bring to this position?
I think I listen a lot, and I like to listen to ideas, and then sometimes things sort of get heated in certain meetings that people are trying to make their points really strong. But if you listen closely, the right idea will be there, and sometimes you just have to be the referee and say, this is what's going to happen. The worst thing, in my opinion, a director can do is force something down. It has to be a team effort. People have to understand the importance of what you're trying to do. If it's student-centered, you're going to be okay, even though a lot of people will complain about that because they don't see it as student-centered for their child. But as a collective group, if it's centered around kids and it's going to make things better for kids and teachers, that's my driving force that we try to do. So, and a lot of times that's not buying something. That's taking your best staff members, whether it's teachers or principals or whatever, developing something locally. Because we do that a lot within our district. We take our staff and we develop digital curriculum, for example. We don't pay people to do that. We let our staff do that. They know what the standards are, they know how to get the lesson plans ready for that, and they know what documentation needs to be out there digitally. So we spend a lot of time doing that, and I would hope that you could do that here with your staff. I have no reason to doubt that.
So knowing that we all make mistakes, what is one mistake that you've made in your job, and how did you own it? What did you learn from that mistake to improve your future job performance?
This probably would have been within my first year with Wilson County Schools. I had a county commissioner ask me a question on the floor of the county commission, and I wasn't ready for it. I'll make sure that did not happen again. It was a question I took for granted, and I've also learned if you don't know, don't say anything. Go find your answer and then come back. So if I can't give you an answer right off when you ask me the question, I'll say, let me look at it or investigate it, and then I'll come back to you. So that was a critical and valuable lesson, I guess.
Can you think of a problem that was brought to you recently, and what was the problem and how did you handle it?
That's a loaded question because that's almost every day. Probably most recently is the tornado event of March 2nd. Because what happens with parents and community people, these 2 schools that got hit is on a major road. It's like Highway 31. I mean, all you see is a damaged school, and the other school sits behind it. They don't understand the process of working with an insurance company, and what I've had to do is tell them this is not a $10,000 claim. More than likely it's in the $80 to $85 million range because you're going to replace 2 schools. And to get the board, the county commission, and the public to understand that when all they see is damaged buildings, that's hard. But if they look around the community, there's a lot of damaged homes that they're still waiting on an answer from their insurance company, and it's nowhere near $80 or $85 million. Now, the one thing that's been good for the county commission standpoint, they understand that when I first started, we were underinsured, and I took care of that and made sure we had replacement cost value on our buildings. So they heard Mickey's not going to ask us for money. So, and I get that, and that's fine. So they backed off. But the board's been patient, but not been patient because they want to see something happen too. But when you get in those kinds of processes and those kinds of dollars, there's a checklist that these companies have to go through, and we're working through the checklist because our ultimate goal is to get things replaced.
How have you worked with the following groups? to generate support for the schools? How have you worked with employees, business, diverse community groups, and media, generating support from those areas?
First and foremost, be consistent. I would say be transparent, but I think that word's overused. But be consistent, be truthful, and from the employee standpoint, they've got to know you have their back. There will be certain investigations might not turn out well, but for the most part, the worst thing you can do is say you're guilty just because you got a phone call, because that's not always true. There's a lot of things fabricated. Teachers are under a tremendous amount of stress. They're not always guilty. So you have to know that from the employee standpoint, and they have to know you have their backs. From a business standpoint, same thing. If you're invited out to Rotary or Kiwanis or the chamber meetings or whatever, you got to go. You can't say the worst thing you can say is I don't have time. You've got to be out there, and you've got to tell them you got to answer their questions, and you got to present facts about the district and build that support with businesses. From the standpoint of diverse groups, the same thing goes about. If you use the philosophy, every kid needs the same opportunities to learn. Sometimes it's a cultural barrier. If parents didn't finish school, they don't really see the importance of education. You've got to build that in that student so they break that cycle for a diverse group. And that could be low income, it could be race, it could be anything. You've got to break that. If teachers and principals know those kids and know what's going on in their individual lives that's making them do certain things, you can address those at the school level. If you got to break some things you just have to break and give those kids opportunity and let them know you expect things out of them. Some kids just need to be, you set me a bar and I'll show you. And kids love that, or at least that's my experience. From the media standpoint, same thing. Don't turn down the media. If they ask you questions, I always have the philosophy, especially if it's around budget numbers or anything like that, I will typically ask them to call me back, and I want them to repeat what they're saying, especially around numbers, because education lingo and education numbers, they can get lost in it in a minute. If you don't do it every day, you're going to get lost in it. So, but for the media standpoint, I ask them to respect and quote correctly. And sometimes if they don't, maybe it's a separate meeting that we need to have individually and say, look, I don't mind talking to you, but if you're going to continually put things out there that's wrong or things we didn't say or didn't intend, then that needs to be addressed, at least in my opinion.
Thank you.
What approach do you intend to take in communicating with the board if you are selected as superintendent?
Goes back to a little bit of what we've already talked. Some of you that drove me around today, you saw me from time to time get my phone out, so I'm having a hard time keeping the phone up because it's usually in my hand. But I understand the importance of today. I'm available 24/7. If you need something from me, I simply ask that you call me and let me look at something and then get back to you. I don't like to be blindsided, nor would I want you to be blindsided. Everybody has to understand in today's communication world with social media and everything, there are times when you will know something before me. There's nothing I can do about that. If something happens on the school bus, I know you're going to know it before me because kids are going to tell. That happens every day for us when something happens, and they've gone from somebody got killed to they needed a Band-Aid. So those things get blown out of proportion very quickly. I would simply say, let me call and find out, did we have a wreck? Where was it at? What's the exact status of it? And call you back for that situation. If it's something personnel related, I do not discuss personnel matters publicly. I will not do that. Just can't do that. That's between the employee and me. That's the way I view that as the director of schools. So I would expect principals and everybody else to follow that protocol. You just don't do that to the staff because that's a lack of respect.
So So I would assume you've done some research of our district as you kind of looked into this. Can you name one area specifically that you think that under your leadership you could improve?
The first thing I would tackle would be the morale and respect for teachers. I think your teachers need to know they're respected and their morale needs to be lifted. And you do that through, if you give them tools to use in their profession, you provide good professional development and not just throw things at them. It's the worst thing you can do from a district level is hand somebody a piece of software or a device and say, make this work. You cannot do that. Things need to be vetted. You need to make sure they're a common sense approach, but more importantly, they're sustainable. And then you have to look internally. Are there resources that we're using that may not be wise? Can those be diverted, whether it's pay raises for your teachers or some other program that needs to happen to move your levels of your schools so you end up with more reward schools and you end up as an exemplary district? Some things just have to be put in place to do that.
Picky. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
What evidence can you cite to demonstrate you have the ability to work effectively with diverse student population and multicultural groups?
I think if you go back and look at our ability of what we've done as far as Dr. Wright and I have done with Wilson County Schools, and you go back and look, when you become reward schools and you become an exemplary district, your subgroups are starting to perform well and there's not gaps in those subgroups. So you have to be intentional in how you work on those things. You have to be intentional in what you're doing. But if we're focused on making those students better and the staff is going to know their kids, that's what I would want. I would want the teachers and the principals to know their kids, and if they need something from me, I need to know what it is so I can figure out a way to do that if it's going to make them more effective. That's a challenge because if you've got 20, 25, 30, 35 kids in a classroom and you've got to know them, you've got 150 to 180 kids a day, that is a challenge. But it also is going to make you a better teacher. It's going to make those kids better, and you're knowing what expectations to level on that classroom to make those students better. If those students get better, the teachers are better, the principals are better, the district staff's better, the director's better, and you as a board will be recognized without having to do a lot, because that's where it's going to happen. Your recognition needs to come out of the classrooms. It doesn't need to come from the district level. Everything you would get accolade-wise is going to come right there from the classroom.
How would you work with the board to be effective, make good decisions, and be respected as a board and by the community?
Make sure any recommendations that are made to the board are thought out, they're student-centered, you're taking care of the staff, then the community is going to, that's one of the things that I've noticed, you have really good community support for your schools. That's very evident by the placement of where your schools are, but also they take pride in those communities. It's hard when you're growing to keep that community identity sometimes, so it's very important that that continues. But the way I would work with the board is to listen to you all, and if you ask me to investigate something, make sure it's investigated and the pros and cons are laid out for you. And if the pros and cons are laid out, and then whatever decision you all implement with a majority vote of the board, it's my job to implement that. And so sometimes we're going to do things okay and good, and sometimes the public's going to say we're not doing so good. So everybody just has to understand that. If you do something that's not quite really good, then you have to be willing to back up and say, okay, what was wrong with that particular implementation, and roll it back to correct it, at least in my opinion.
Describe how you have led a school or system in creating a vision and building support to accomplish that vision.
Part of what we do, we've revamped revamped our whole school district, and I'm on most of the teams that do that, because pretty much everything you do in a school system is going to evolve around the budget, so I sit in on a lot of committees. But what we do is we revamped our whole school district from a vision standpoint, a mission standpoint, a policy book standpoint, and all those pieces came together around the classroom is what we did. If you went out to our school website or our district website, you'll see a lot of things that was not there before. We brought in new logos that represented the community. We brought in a new look to that logo. We've also, again, changed our mission, our vision, but we also worked with the board, and we went through every single policy, and we've updated those and try to review them every 6 months to make sure each section of the budget gets looked at. Some of that's going to be involved in around, sometimes the staff may bring a concern with a policy or its implementation, but we need to make sure our policies are student-centered and are going to make improvements in the classroom.
Describe a situation related to your current job that demonstrates your ability to inspire and motivate people.
One of the things I do is I try to hire the right people first. I'm not a micromanager. If I make the right personnel decisions, I should not have to micromanage. I think that's inspires people because you're not over their back all the time. And if they're doing their job and it's centered around kids, you shouldn't have to do that because you have no reason to do that. I think that's where I do that. I'm an encourager. I had a director of schools several years ago tell our whole staff when he was introduced, it was funny, but it's real. He said, if you're the kind of person that needs a pat on the back, put a Post-it note on my door, and I'll try to come around and do that. People should not need that. From time to time, as a director of schools, you've got to get by every department. You cannot ask people to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. If you talk to any of my maintenance workers or anything like that, the only thing I've not done in Wilson County is I've not drove a bus. But I've been on a bus with the drivers, but I'll go out. I've done things with maintenance workers. I've cleaned schools before. You cannot ask people to do something you're not willing to do.
Explain how you would develop a school system budget. We're right there in it, aren't we? And
yes,
tell us who you would involve and how you would involve them. And I know your budget's coming up next week, right?
It is. We've already been through our board, and we've been through the education committee. Our county commission works on a committee process, so we've been through education, we've been through budget. Budget has sent it back to the board with a modification. We're actually meeting on that Thursday night, and then I'll go back through the process with the commission. The way I develop budgets is I'll send out a memo to every principal and department head within the district, and they have to tell me what they want going into the next budget year. And it's sort of a simple philosophy. I want them to take their improvement plan. They have to tie their improvement plan to their budget request, which is part of BEP 2.0. Then I ask them at the end to rank from 1 to 10 of those items. If you got money, which one would you want first, second, third? So that's from the school level, but it's also from the department standpoint. The one thing that we do for the way I always envision it, or what I tell those department heads and principals, I understand sometimes you may not get things on your list, but it's your opportunity to tell the Board of Education what's going to make your school better. Once we gather all that information, I do a flash drive for the board, or sometimes you can put it out on Google Docs. It just depends on the board member. But each one of you would get a flash drive with every request, no matter where it came from. And that way, what you see is all the principals' requests, all the department heads' requests, and it's their goal, it's their mission to tell you what's going to make that department or school better. And it's going to be different across the school district. If you can get things more consistent and equitable across the district, what my principals have learned is instead of 10 people asking for 10 different things, they have figured out if they all ask for one thing, they're going to get it. and they're a competitive group. So instead of getting nothing, they work together to come with something, whether it's an ISS teacher or it's a extra EA or it's something like that. They've learned to do that, which it makes it easier on me because I don't have to do 10 requests. I can just do one because it's unified across the district. So that makes principals collaborate a lot when they do that and they look at it from that standpoint. But again, it's built around their school improvement plans. And then our budget should be around the district level improvement plan as well, if it's specific enough to meet that.
We've got, we're not going to break till about 6:15, and I know that some of you may have some follow-up to things we have discussed here. So I'm going to, which we had talked about having follow-up after the break, but this would be a good time if any of you wanted to follow up on any of what we've already done now. Okay. Mr. Beebe, you got to turn your light on. He sits next to me, and I never call on him. So now, okay, all right, go ahead.
Okay. One of the questions we had asked was about building a successful team.
Yes, sir.
I think I was actually the first one there. If you could kind of go into some details about your actual impact on building that team, from your experiences coming from Wilson County District. Like, how involved were you in that part of the process of putting that team together?
Dr. Wright's been with us for 7 years, and I can probably think on one hand the number of days we have not talked. I know that sort of sounds different, but she and I talk every day about different things. Part of it's staffing, part of it's you're going to identify people if you do your job and you're watching people and you're looking for, you're going to know people that can fit certain criteria for certain jobs that may not have the courage to step out and apply for jobs. So that's what I mean by putting people in the right place. You may have read a book, putting the right people in the right place on the bus. Sort of goes along with that philosophy. But if the staff and everybody's doing what we need to do for the classroom, we're going to identify strong staff members that when openings occur and you can promote within the school district, you need to do that first. If you can't, then you need to look outside the district. But from the standpoint of coming in and doing I'm not going to call it an investigation, but doing an observation of your setup here, how things are working. Are they working good? Are they not working good? Does anything need to be changed? I think that would be important for a director to do. And I would hope that the board could support the director if there's things that do need to be corrected. From the standpoint of building the team, Wilson County Schools, when I started, one of the reasons I got a job in February '93, I was an auditor. I actually audited in Murray County. But I did every county, every office in Wilson County. And so when the job came up, I applied for it. And at that time, I think other than the director of schools, I'm the only employee for Wilson County Schools that I interviewed with all 5 board members at the time. And that wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. But anyway, one of the things that we did, when they came out of the deficit, they basically rated all programs, and if it wasn't attached to the wall, it basically got rated to balance a budget for a deficit that got created that shouldn't have got created. So some people call it unfortunate. I called it very fortunate to rebuild the school district. So from day one, since I've started, it was a rebuilding process. It took us 20 years to rebuild the district from that deficit. And part of that is looking at staff, who's not doing the right job. Are we hiring the right people? And if you're not doing that, you have to make corrections in whatever level that is. I made the comment to the teachers over there. Somebody asked me if we formed a committee for assistant principals or teachers. For teachers, no. The person responsible for that school is the principal. If they're not making good decisions, then you need to have a discussion with that principal. if they're making good decisions, the school's gonna function and it's gonna move up, take care of kids and do what it's supposed to. So there are ways to do that and monitor it. Goes along with the question about the budget. You know, you just have to monitor things. If you do put something in place, you gotta monitor it. If it's not working out the way you want it to, how do you fix that? How do you correct that? Sometimes it's the difficult situations from a personnel standpoint. Sometimes it's just a little different direction, maybe a different set of eyes on a certain program. But the people that will drive the change in this district, the district has to respect the teachers and build that morale back for the teachers, and the teachers are going to build the system. That's where your success will come from.
Thank you, ma'am, but I think everything that I had has been touched tonight.
I'll ask this question basically because I've heard you talk all day long, so I want them to
I'm sorry.
maybe whatever no, I didn't mean it negatively. It was really good, and I think there may be some points that I've heard that I'd want you to share with them. And I know that in the teacher meeting, one of the first concerns they had is that you're not an educator. So tell them how you address that.
When you go into a position like I have, the first thing you do, you have to come over a lot of obstacles, because when I first took this job, I was, at that time, 28 years old. So I was a new kid on the block, wet behind the ears. Any comments you wanted to make, I got made toward me. So I had to learn a lot, and I take that very seriously when I do a job. I want to be prepared. I want to understand what we're doing, but I had to understand the academic needs to meet the budgetary needs, and they both go hand in hand if you look at it correctly. So instead of having a 4-year teaching degree or a 6-year teaching degree, I've had a 28-year teaching degree, because that's my job. I have to learn the academics. I have to know what it is. As the director of schools, I was responsible for making personnel decisions and making academic decisions and signing diplomas and things like that. So I've been able to gain that. So I have a quasi-educational degree. It's just not on paper. But the experience I've gotten from the people I've learned from, they've been people that's been in this school district evaluating your schools from SACs for the 28 years to, I've had a tremendous amount of education from very strong instructional people and academic people, and I learn every day. And not only from a business standpoint, but an academic standpoint. But I do know that if you lean on your best staff and you set high expectations, everything else will work itself out. It always has for us, and I think it could here. Again, you have very strong staff that they need to know that it's okay to step out and be that leader, be that mentor, and you can develop a lot of things without having a budget impact by just using your existing staff to do things for kids.
Well, what questions do you have for us?
Well, first, let me just say thank you for the opportunity to visit your community today. It's been a long day, but it's been a very interesting day and a very educational day for me. One of the teachers that was at the other place, we used to go to church together before they moved down to this area, so I was pleased when I saw her to see a face like that. I forgot she had moved down here. I think the one big question I have, and I'll ask several, but the first one is, what's the vision or expectations from you as a board for your director of schools?
Honesty, truthfulness, and making decisions that are in the best interest of children, even if it's a difficult decision. I guess one thing that you've talked about, you've had 20 years to kind of go through plans and monitor and things like that. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot necessarily right now about that, but I'm just curious what your idea is if you're selected for this position as to how you would go through that evaluation process for Maury County Public Schools, and how quickly do you think you can get a feel for how to make those changes from an academic or personnel standpoint that will improve our system?
From the budgetary standpoint, it would not take me very long. From that standpoint, from knowing how your system's set up and what programs are in every school district or every school, I would say it would take at least 6 months at a minimum to do it right, hopefully shorter. It would be a lot of long nights and long hours, because not only are you trying to evaluate the district, but you're going to be asked to be talking to different groups and being introduced to the community and different Rotary groups and Kiwanis group, and I'm sure being asked to be members of those as well, which is fine, in chamber meetings. So you got to rotate all that in and figure that out. But the worst thing you can do is come in here after a month and think you've got it figured out. It's not going to work that quick. Based on the questions I've heard from different community members and teachers, there's a lot of things that need to be addressed that can be addressed without having a budget impact. Respecting teachers, that doesn't cost you a dime. You just got to do it. Trying to come up with looking at ways that, do you have a screener in place? What is that screener? Is it doing what you want it to do up front to evaluate that student? The other part is, do you have a program in place that, whether it's whatever it's called, but it's an assessment tool that you can create pulse points for that student, and it's a student-driven program that says Mickey can do math at this level, but he should be here, or he's reading here and he should be here. Those pulse points are going to let that teacher know I'm either on target with my lesson plans or I'm not, and if I'm not, what do I have to do to fix that? Is that going over here and talking to Ms. Smith to become a better teacher, or am I just missing something? And if the whole class is not on track, then the principal and the teacher really needs to be talking. What are we doing wrong here? What do we got to do to fix that? But the pulse points, the public has to understand, is those are not assessments. Those are not state assessments. You have to have data to move kids up the chain and to make them improve. But again, set those expectations, but don't set the expectations so high that you can't get there. Small increments mean a lot in our business, especially from a data standpoint. And it's not all about data, but it is in what we do today. And if teachers understand how to interpret the data and apply it to their class, that's what they need to learn. But you can't do that without professional development. So you have to offer those things through that professional development so the teachers understand how it works, but not only that, how to apply it to their student or roster so they can improve those students going through there. My philosophy is very straightforward. It's sort of simple. What you see is what you get. It's not, I'm not here for a PR stunt. I'm not here for, it's not about me. It's not about me as a director of schools. That's not what I do. Matter of fact, I use Dr. Wright as a reference. If you'll call her, sometimes she gets upset with me because when we do grand openings and stuff like that, I don't do that. I really don't. And she, I guess, fusses at me because I don't do that, but my job is to make sure everything's in place, everything's working the way it's supposed to. That's their job to get that. And so they will be holding the shovels that are groundbreaking, or they're going to be out there making the speeches when we dedicate a building or recognize kids and those things. I think it's important that everybody knows I support that. But if those teachers are doing their part, again, it's not about anybody at the district level. That classroom is still really important. And I know that sounds weird coming from a business guy. But, again, I know that's where it's at. And I know that's what you have to build anything you do around. And I wouldn't want people to be here just to get a paycheck. They're going to have the drive and the desire to make things better for kids. And teachers don't teach for paychecks, but they need paychecks, because if they did it for a paycheck, there'd be a lot more money out there. And they don't make what they deserve by any stretch of the imagination. And as far as the district staff is concerned, and I made this comment, you're welcome to look at it. It's on our website in our archive videos. But in a budget process, when things get tight, and I'm sure it's the same here, and I don't know, but I'm fairly confident, the first thing the public wants to do is cut the district staff or cut somebody's pay. And those are easy things to say, but those people work hard too if they're doing their job right. And so our job at the district level, again, is to decipher all the lingo that comes out of the legislature in Washington, D.C., and make it palatable for our staff to implement in that classroom. Because there's ways you can read it, and you have to remember it was written by lawyers, not educators. And no offense to lawyers, but they write their bills. Are you a lawyer? Oh, I didn't know that. Sorry about that. But that's what they do. Hopefully you don't write bills. So those things, that's what the district staff has to do. But if we do that right, the teachers are going to know we support them, and we're not shoving something down their throats. It's something that we feel like we can work, but still meet the requirements of reporting into the state and reporting into D.C., whatever we need to report in from a statistical standpoint. And I think I made this comment down at Mount Pleasant today because the hospital administrator was there. But other than his business, this is the second most regulated business in the country. And most people do not know that. Most people do not know that somebody out of Atlanta, Georgia, can be in this district office demanding records, and you have no choice but to give them to them. Washington, D.C., state. We're regulated by a lot of people, health department people, fire marshal people, and they can shut you down. They can make you look really bad. So you have to build those relationships with all those people. And if you're doing things right, even sometimes if they think you did something wrong, if you're making an attempt to do everything right, they're going to say, well, let's see if we can't fix this going forward, instead of making a major news media blitz out of it. So that's always been our goal, and we've tried to do that with our public for where we're at now in Wilson County. I work very hard on budgetary stuff, along with academic stuff, for our county commission, because county commissioners need to understand the academic side too. They don't always do that because that doesn't have pavement on it in front of their house, and they don't see bricks and mortar. And I understand that's important for them. We also have to understand they've got a lot of needs in the county. From a county commissioner standpoint, they're not just looking at schools. I'm sure the way you're growing, they have roads and they have emergency services and law enforcement, and I'm sure you got discussions going on about a jail. Our county's about ready to build another jail or expand our jail. All those things are important for a community to be safe and protected. But education is a piece of it too. So as long as you're working together and everybody's getting their fair share, I think that goes back to building trust with the county commission, that you just have to understand, and we're going to advocate it. And a lot of times you're not going to like it, but if you do these things for other departments, you need to at some point do something for us. That was a very long answer.
No, well, we gave you a chance to ask us questions, but then we asked back. So,
well,
anything else?
I think one of the other questions is that sort of told me what your mission and vision was, and I guess do you all feel comfortable in knowing that the director of schools and the professional staff run the day-to-day operations of the system or not? Oh, it's just a question.
I mean, yes, I will say I think we all understand that the superintendent runs the day-to-day. I think part of the issue that we have is how effectively that's done. And I feel like there can always be a dialogue between the board and the superintendent to make sure that that monitoring piece is being done that you're talking about, and that accountability is in place. And for me, that's something that's just been lacking in the past. But I don't want to micromanage. I really don't. But in the absence of management, sometimes I think it looks like the board is trying to micromanage, but I don't think that's the intention. But it sounds like you have a lot of management experience.
We do. Like I said, I've worked under Dr. Wright's my 8th one. I would say 9, but one of those was me, so I can't count myself. I did an interim in between a director search 1 year. But if you're making good recommendations and they're solid recommendations, then that goes back to building respect with the teachers, the principals, district staff, and the board. And I think as long as you're consistent and you're doing those things, I think it's a good team partnership approach. Everybody's not going to like every decision. I tell everybody all the time, I got a 50-50 chance of making you happy, when we make decisions, but, I think our staff will tell you that they're very concerned. Dr. Wright's retiring next year after nearly 40 years, and so, and some of them were concerned about me coming down here, for this interview, and I mean, that made me appreciate them even more, but, we built a good team with where we're at. We think we put some things in place that make the teachers successful, and again, it's not about us. I don't get out in the news media a lot. Like I said, Dr. Wright gets on to me a lot about that. But, again, it's doing things for kids. If you're doing things for kids and things are equitable, they're comparable, and every kid has an opportunity at the same education in your district, everything else should take care of itself.
I'd like to pick up on that as well as far as a board member. I think the idea of trust and transparency with board members is really paramount. I don't want you to say what you think I want to hear. I just want to know that what you're telling me is what is, even if it is what I don't want to hear. And I think that's what we would want in someone who manages, and that we have the trust and knowledge that they're going to take care of the, like you say, I mean, we don't want to do the day-to-day operations of the school. We don't want to go out and listen to teachers and to their concerns. But you know from what you've heard today that there is a lot of not dissatisfaction, but just they need trust, and I think that's what we need as well. So.
Well, if you're really bored and you want to watch about 15 hours of budget discussions, you can go to our website and you'll see I do not have a problem telling you things or history or anything like that, because sometimes you just have to repeat things to remind people of what has occurred. I will have to grasp history rather quickly, especially from a budgetary standpoint. But as board members or county commissioners, unless you're told repeatedly, sometimes you don't understand it because it can get lengthy. Education jargon is really, it's about as bad. My two kids are in the medical field, so I don't talk to them about that because I can't. But we have to get out of using letters and different names, and just like when the report card comes out where it's going to talk about funding at a school level, there's going to have to be a lot of clarifications that you as a board you're going to have to understand, because it could make something look like schools are favored when they're not. Depends on how much federal money is there and some different things. So this report card is going to be a hot topic across the entire state. Right now we bought a little time because of the state testing debacle, but when that report card hits, you can't write in school language. You're going to have to write in layman's terms so the public understands what you're saying and why this school appears to be better funded than others. And if it's a Title I school, by its nature, you're going to have more money spent per kid because you can't supplement. Your high schools typically will be higher than a middle school or elementary simply because you have all your coaches and you have a lot of CTE programs and you have a lot of AP courses or dual enrollment courses, or at least I hope you do. That would explain your high school differences. So that report card explanation is going to be real important because not only will the staff look to you for that, but the community as a whole will look to you for those explanations and why. So we have to do a really good job of explaining things to you so you can talk to your constituents on a regular basis in their terms, not school terms.
And this is somewhat of a question, but an opportunity for you to share with what I think they would have wanted to have heard from you. And I heard it at both or all three times, talking about all schools having some equity, and we even had at the leadership with Mary Lyons somebody talking about that they moved to Sunnyside so that their child could go to a specific school. What about the kids who can't do that? So I'd like for you to respond to that.
Well, there's a schedule you have to turn in with your federal money, and it's a comparability study, and you say there's so many teachers per kid, there's so many teacher aides per kid, so many assistant principals, so many counselors, and all that kind of things that you have to do, and it's outside of your title money. That would be a clue to me if a school is not staffed correctly, that I would look at, that you can look at as a board or ask for that information in a report. Again, my philosophy is it doesn't matter what zip code you live in or the color of your skin. If you have the same opportunities and expectations are set for you, you will meet that. I'll use Lebanon High School as an example for our district. We changed administrators there 4 years ago, maybe 5. But part of their issue was a lot of the staff said those kids can't do this. And it's one of our minority schools as far as a higher percentage of that. Well, they had no expectations. If you don't give kids expectations, they're not going to do anything. You don't want kids to flounder. So Dr. Walters changed that. They dress better. They look better. They're more engaged in the school culture than they've ever been. And he set expectations. I want you to go to college. Another principal I learned a lot from was Mel Brown. He's principal at Mount Judd High School. It was the National High School of the Year a couple years ago. He retired. But one of the things he does that goes along with what we try to do, he makes every freshman, when they come in that door, he made every freshman, he handed them an index card. And he said, you have 2 weeks to fill this out. Guarantee me you're going to graduate. You write your name on here. Tell me what college you want to go to, if you want to go to one. And then you have to come back and shake my hand. And Mel Brown knew 2,100 kids every day. The most amazing thing I've ever witnessed. The principal knew 2,100 kids. Probably some of his teachers did not. But he would stand in, they call it the Mr. Brown spot. He would always step in one place in the stairwell, 3 levels. And when they rotated down that stairwell, if a kid didn't stop and say, my name's Mickey Hall, he stopped you. That's what you have to get to in our business today, because kids don't see that at home sometimes. And I always tell our teachers, this is the way I'll close out any faculty meeting, and I have to be careful how I say it because it's emotional to me, but those teachers are going to see those kids at their best, and they're going to see them at their worst, and they may be the only one to pat them on the back or tell them they love them. And there's no reward we can give them for that, but they'll get their reward one day. It's just not going to be from us. Kids need that, and they want that, and they want to be expected to do things for themselves as well as their school. The one thing I can tell you is passion runs through me. I'm competitive, and I want people to do what's right and take care of kids. That I can tell you that's my commitment.
Anything else before we take a break here? Poor man has had nothing to drink or eat or anything all day, so we're going to adjourn, and we'll be back here in a little over an hour, and see you all at Puckett's then, okay? Maybe we could get together and not take so many cars. The parking might be an issue, so I'm riding with Denny, with you. Mrs. Day? Okay, I'm going to call us back to, we're here back from dinner and back to any follow-up we need to do. I know we were able to do some of the things we planned before we went to dinner, and once again, last opportunity. You have questions for us?
I don't think so. I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to visit today, for the board members that took me around to the different schools. I appreciate that, and meeting different community people in town and around the county and learning more about your school system. I enjoyed meeting with the teachers and the district staff, and I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity. And if you have any questions, I think I gave you one of my cards. Feel free to call me on those things if you have anything that you think of after we get through here tonight.
We know you'll answer in 24 hours, so.
I will. Or sooner.
We're not going to, probably not going to eat meat until the 8th to consider this, give a little time, get through this week and think about it. And so we do appreciate your coming, and I think it's been a good day. Mr. Moore has something to say.
And I appreciate that. I do have a follow-up question. Something I think we had briefly talked about, that we're, in Murray County, we're currently under the financial management of the Modified 81 Act, I believe is how we refer to it. If you could just kind of go over maybe your experience with that, or how you approach it. It's something new for us that we're learning to adjust to as we're in a kind of a new arrangement with a financial management board that kind of oversees things. And if you could maybe touch on maybe some of your experience with that, or how you would address that or work through that with us here.
Probably the way I would suggest that I could work with it is hopefully we can gain the respect of the county commission. Hopefully that wouldn't be an obstacle. In the past, it's hard for people to handle a budget when they don't know all the goals of a school district, and that's no offense to anyone, unless you know those academic requirements and the goals of the district. It's hard to manage that kind of budget. When I first started, we were under the 81 Act in Wilson County, and we did have some issues there, and we did sue to get out from under that, and we did, and we have our own finances right now at that time, and that came about from a deficit back then, but so I've really, most of my career, I've not been under that. That would be something that I would like to talk with you about, but also the county mayor and some commissioners. I don't know if you have a budget committee or a finance committee. I'm not sure how your committees are set up here, but I would hope we could gain that respect back and know that we're going to do things right, and that would not be an issue going forward, I would hope.
Anyone else? We'll call it a night then.
All right.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it.